seu mestrado na Sciences Po de Paris, seu doutorado na École des Hautes Études Sciences Sociales, sua tese de doutorado está na Universidade de Paris-Sorbonne. Ela ensinou em várias universidades na França e também no exterior, e tem trabalhado muito com a questão do ensino superior ultimamente, abordando a questão do desafio que o processo de globalização vem fazendo para o ensino superior, a questão também da qualidade do ensino superior, trabalhando também com instituições de elite e produção de elite, e também estratégias em busca de excelência, de prestígio no ensino superior no contexto internacional. Agradeço a presença de vocês e passo a palavra para a professora Catherine.
Thank you. So, I understood that I am the victim of a very tough competition between what happens in Brazil currently, and I can really understand. If I was myself free right now, I would run to the other place. Okay, I'm going to speak English because I think more people can understand English than French in the audience. Well, what I'm going to tell you is based on a large research work which I made with a rather large team a few years ago in 7 countries in the world, many universities and many departments, in order, in the northern world, I would say, to understand what was going on in higher education. Okay? I won't explain the research work itself. I can go to that afterwards if you're interested. First of all, okay, I would like to remind you, or to tell you in case you are not informed, that higher education and research are facing throughout the world a very disrupted environment. I'll give you a few figures to about changes in size and balance of higher education, which of course have many consequences. There is more and more educated people in the world, in higher education. There was about 700 million people with secondary or post-secondary education in 1970. There is 10 times more, which is anticipated by 2100. In 2012, the number of students almost doubled in the world, from about 100 million to 196 million. Half of the growth came from the BRICS, including Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The number of internationally mobile students could exceed 7.5 million in 2025, against 4 million only this year. This has a first consequence. Higher education was not a major concern for states, and not even for sociology, I would say. But the growth of students' population and the internationalization of higher education has transformed higher education and research in a priority issue in terms of costs, in terms of revenues, and in terms of organization. It has encouraged also the development of new institutions of higher education, including in countries with a tradition of public higher education, including private universities. Finally, we attend to a phenomenon of multipolarization of research. Innovation, research, and higher education are not anymore the privilege of traditionally so-called advanced countries, In 2000, there were no emergent country among the 5 top in terms of research and development national spending. In 2010, China and South Korea do better than France and the UK, for instance. So, the number of students in the world, you also see, of course, that the distribution of higher education is highly variable across continents. Africa being at the bottom, United States and Korea being at the top, and Latin America being in the 3rd position in 2014 in terms of percent of higher education. Now, this general landscape has led in almost all countries in the world to reforms and even to radical reforms for some countries. I have to tell you a bit about that for you to understand where I'm going to. These reforms developed between the years 1980 till the years till now. They aimed in countries, especially with public and free higher education, they aimed at re-legitimizing the allocation of public money to universities and research. The idea was less taxpayer money at national level for better return on investment. It was also a result of the loss of trust in collegial governance ability of universities to target resources in an optimal way. These reforms introduced a new balance between university missions. As a matter of fact, I use the word universities, but it includes all higher education institutions, which is important in certain countries like France, of course. The new balance comes from the fact that higher education has been stressed as a source of disrupting innovation, thought to be a source of economic development. So the notion that public policies have developed throughout the world, including, especially in Europe, is that you have to develop top higher education in order to incite top innovation and economic advance. The consequence of that in many places has been that other missions of higher education have been driven down, such as the service to local communities, links with local labor markets, but also the education to citizenship, and we know here in Brazil, but all over, how important it is to have people informed and educated to democratic practices, for instance. What was the content of the reforms? Very shortly, it was based on a managerial turn in the public sector, which was developed in higher education, but also in health and in many other fields, to develop organizational autonomy and accountability of universities on the basis of new public management policy, which links incentives, performance, evaluation of performance, and allocation of resources. In various ways, all over, including in the US, this mechanism, this circle, has been developed with many consequences. So excellence has become the buzzword for quality. And what is excellence? In this environment, excellence means performance based on measurement by metrics. Typically, international ranking leagues or any ranking in countries based mostly on research, and in research based mostly on publications in journals ranked by their importance in the fields. Typically, excellence is that, and it's a certain, what has been forgotten since the notion of excellence has developed in this environment is that excellence is only one way to qualify quality. Excellence is supposed to be the best proxy to quality. But there is other ways to see quality, and there was other ways to see quality, and there's still other ways to see quality. The implicit purpose of this is to benchmark, implicitly or explicitly to benchmark the top research universities in the world, which, as we know, are located mostly in the United States and in the UK. Of course, the publication of the first international ranking by the University Jiaotong in Shanghai has been a shock for many countries, especially in Europe, where all of a sudden the supposed eternal quality of the higher education of research of these countries has been not denied, but has been re-evaluated. The scores of higher education institutions in Europe, in these rankings, that one or others, are middle range, not so excellent, and many countries, including France, are running after upgrading into these leagues, which means adopting a policy of excellence by qualifying excellence, quality as a source, as being reduced to excellence. Now, what are the consequences of these changes at the level of universities? I think, I'm not the only one, that each university universities have been studied within national systems for a long time. The Humboldtian system, the Napoleonic system, the Anglo-Saxon system. We have to go down to universities considered as organizations of their own, which are embedded in multiple contexts that shaped the trajectory ahead of this politic by impacting the resources and constraints, their internal policies and behaviors. Even when lacking formal autonomy, universities are not passive agents submitted to principle. They are situated, action-oriented social orders implementing rules in their own way. Reforms are selected in each university tensions between what I call two regimes of worth. What values university? What builds the value of a university? What builds the value of a university can be defined by quality based on a socially based judgment, what I call reputation, and can be also measured through these metrics. That's what I call excellence. Okay? Of course, some universities can be, under this terminology, can be both excellent and prestigious, but they can also not be excellent nor prestigious, and they can also be prestigious but not excellent. Okay, so if we use these two visions of quality, we can build a table which locates ideal types of universities. The the ones we called venerables, which have a high reputation in their own country. Usually it doesn't go, it can be exported, but it's not necessarily known outside of the country. The ones who are top of what we have called top of the pile, the tops, which are the ones which are very high internationally, both on reputation and excellence. And then we have, but these ones are small types, cover a small number of institutions, but they are very much a model for thinking the functioning and the role of universities. But the largest number of universities throughout the world is made of missionaries, which are not ranked on excellence, which are not highly reputed, but which most of them fulfill a very important mission in society in terms of proximity to the local institutions, to the local students, to the local labor market, and so on, and to democracy in action at the basic level. And a new type, which has been developing along the reforms, is the wannabe type, what we call the wannabe type, the want to be, what we would call in French arrivistes, vénérables, aristocrats, if I may say so, and wannabes are arrivistes. They want to become. Wannabes, most of the time, are national, well-known national institutions, higher education institutions, but as the landscape widens with globalization, they lose their reputation throughout the world, and they try to regain a reputation in the world by applying recipe, which increase their excellence. Okay? So I could cite, of course, a lot of institutions in France and elsewhere to illustrate what I'm saying, but I won't, because I want to remain polite with many of my colleagues. Okay, these ideal types, of course, these ideal types can be defined by specific properties. I don't go into details of the tables. If you wish to have them, I'll give them to you. But what is very remarkable is that each of them have different properties on the judgment of quality, polarization of norms, on value bases, on the allocation of tasks, on the division of labor and management. They also are, each of them is also very specific in terms of governance patterns. From the top of the piles, where the role of scholars and the role of management are both very important, and the check and balance between both is a major way through which the university reproduces its quality, to missionaries, where neither scholars nor management are so important into the governance, each one ignoring the other one. The coordination is also working in different ways in both, in each type of institutions, and we could qualify very shortly the top of the pile type as organic, the wannabes as mechanical bureaucracies, the venerables as professional democracies, bureaucracies. I'm using the concepts of Andrew Mintzberg, and the missionaries as anarchical bureaucracies. So now, which institution can take advantage of reforms? That's the issue. Not all of them have the same organizational properties, the same governance properties, and therefore not the same strategic capacity. I don't show you the huge table about strategic capacity, but we can discuss it afterwards if you wish. So, in order to take advantage of reforms, universities have to handle tensions which result from this double regime of force. The level of effort required from a given university to take benefit of reforms depends on the strength of these internal tensions, which of course are much higher among missionaries than across TOPS, which are quite strong among venerables, and which are kind of an engine for wannabes. So the strength of these tensions impact the level of effort required. The internal homogeneity versus heterogeneity of these institutions is also important. Each of these types is characterized by a dominant vision of quality. Venerables, as well as TOPS, as well as wannabes, have a uniform vision of quality, which is not the same between the TOPS and the wannabes, but the vision of quality is unified within the institution because there is a concentration of this type of quality in this given institution. It is not exactly the same with missionaries, because missionaries are very heterogeneous internally in terms of the vision of quality of each department, let's say. So in order to understand what can happen among missionaries, you have to understand the internal policies and political life of the institution, which is trying to deal with different visions of quality in a single organization. And that's where, of course, the strategic capacity of the institution matters. So, I would like to say a few things about the challenges and issues raised by this typology and these evolutions. First of all, I would like to stress that the sources of TOPS excellence, TOPS being the pattern to be copied to become a world-class university in common vision, and TOPS being the source of the design of higher education and research policies in most countries. TOPS are not just a type which is characterized by much money and good return on investment, let's say. TOPS base their sustainability on a virtuous cycle that they developed over time. Most of the time they are quite old institutions, between governance model, between the reputation which builds Matthew effects, and of course is a source of big revenues favoring good recruitments of excellent staff and students, and good revenues and activity of these people sustaining the position of these institutions as first movers on research, on world research agendas, but also on innovation in pedagogy, for instance. So, if you want to build a top university, not a world-class university only, you have to build the social processes which back this virtuous circle. And you have to make a deal about how you are going to recruit your staff and students. When a wannabe recruits a new member, what does it do? It looks at its rank on an H index or any type of index. What is the number of his or her publications? Are they made in top-ranked journals? Do they publish rather in journals than in books, which are considered as essays by such institutions, and so on. So what you do when you recruit someone in a wannabe institution, you reward former performance. Former performance in terms of how many you have published and what is the substance of what you have published. Is it exploitation? James March. Is it exploitation? Is it exploration? The rush towards publication, which has certain advantages also, as a consequence is that you have to publish, and you will publish in a very conform way. You will be encouraged to publish quickly, to conform to standardized patterns, and to exploit what you have already done and what the resources of your environment are. But you are not keen of going for exploration because exploration takes time. Exploration is uncertain. Exploration leads outside of the journals of your specific field, and all this is very complicated and not very rewarding in this environment. So the very engine of TOPS is the pursuit of talent, which means that it is to try to find out ex ante and not ex post people who are likely to be very innovative in the scientific world. And you have to reduce the uncertainty of this recruitment, and precisely TOPS universities have developed social processes, formal and informal, that increase the probability to collectively reduce uncertainty on the recruitment of new members. So, having said that, I have to raise a question. As you know, some countries are being very impressive in the current landscape. More than 1,000 universities in China. Incredible results in terms of innovation, sometimes often quite dangerous for the world. Arabia Saudi has won 100 ranks in the Shanghai ranking within a year, a few years ago, by buying very excellent academic staff. So this raises the question, is it possible that the only power of money, the only power to buy and to sell, like in a football team, in non-collegial context, is this sufficient to sustain exploration in cutting-edge research? Question. If not, what are the consequences of the divergence between being top-ranked and being top-creative? Next question, important for Europeans and for all countries who did not develop from the very beginning stratified higher education systems. In the US, you have the research universities, you have the second tier, you have community colleges. And each of these type of institutions is quite homogeneous, as I said before, in terms of the evaluation of quality and the policy which results from this evaluation of quality. This is not the case in Europe, where countries have developed higher education. Each one is its own way, according to a national pattern, but in a way that was supposed to afford the same type of service all over the territory. Of course, there is specific situations if you think of France, but each country is very different of the other, but each country is also very specific. France is specific for sure, but Germany is specific, the Netherlands are specific, and so on and so forth. In these countries, and that's why universities are heterogeneous, universities have been distributed quality instead of concentrating it. They are trying at the moment to develop more stratified systems, but they are far from the end of the story. Yet, there is a very important question for Europe and probably for many other countries. Can still little stratified systems, such as the ones of the continental European countries, sustain internationally excellent and high reputation universities? Can they develop Matthew effects? The labeling by brands brings big money to the already branded at a high level in the US or in the UK. For instance, a few years ago I looked at that. Half of the new endowments given to Oxford and Cambridge in the UK, given to British universities, were given to Oxford and Cambridge. So you see there is Matthew effects which are more and more reinforcing. And can also these universities in a distributed reputation system, can they stratify faculty statuses? Faculty are most often public servants, or less now, but with long-term contracts in continental Europe, not in the UK. So to stratify, will faculty statuses become stratified? Do politically these countries have the strength to do it? And if not, how are they going to catch talents on the international, what has become an international labor market of academics? STAR is very costly. And it's not only that we cannot afford in terms of resources, academic resources, financial resources to hire stars, it's also that we are not ready, in many countries at least, including France, we are not ready to accept a stratification among academics. Stratification by money, I mean stratifications remains by status, or scientific status. Consequences for the venerables. The most likely trajectory of venerables is to be weakened in the middle range, because for evident reasons, the institutional strength of these institutions is based on their national reputation. On their national reputation. Second, their national reputation, the advantages of the national reputations get weakened by internationalization, which changes the scale of evaluation of worth. And at the same time, they are weakened in their relationships with other national elites, which may be a very important feature in countries like France, where the link between the socio-economic and political elites on the one side and scientific elites is, or used to be, is still a source of important advantages for wannabes, for venerables, sorry. The risk that wannabes run is of a very different type. Policies encourage academic institutions to be ambitious, meaning that they encourage them to upgrade by developing better positions on metrics, by developing productivity strategies. The productivity strategies mean that everyone is in competition with everyone, within the institution and throughout the institutions of the same type, or with top universities. This endangers what makes the social substance of higher education institutions, what we name their affectio societatis, because that fosters, first of all, exploitation rather than exploration, as I said before, and also because the academics in these organizations are running not after the commitment to the institution, but they are running after their position on the market. So there is no loyalty in such institutions. If you get a better offer from another place, you'll catch it without considering what you are due to the institution. Some of them develop, the most virtuous one, I would say, develop a portfolio of worth. That means that on the one side, they play the game of productivity, rankings, and so on and so forth, but the resources they catch from this game, they allocate them both to go on in terms of productivity, but also to develop explorative research. What are the risks for missionaries? The first risk for missionaries is that they lose energy to comply with policy requirements which invite them to reach unreachable excellence in their case, instead of improving their creativity and their activity on what they are good at, either in specific field as a high quality and high excellence organization, or in others, departments aimed at providing good education to facilitate upward mobility of students and so on. So the very danger for missionaries, and as a matter of fact for the countries who host and all do missionary institutions, is that such policies, unidimensional policies on research productivity, as evaluated by rankings, metrics, that this type of policy damages what makes the strengths of most missionary universities. That is, the ability to deal at the shop floor level, in a way. At the same time, traditional missions of universities in their environment and their territory. And last but not least, these policies, which have had, in my opinion, or which have an interesting impact on changes in higher education and research systems, have experienced also, and it's very visible in the UK, a turning point. After a certain point, these policies, which were very productive in terms of putting some fresh air in old traditional institutions, become to be to discourage innovation. And these policies, of course, make scientific production, make may put scientific production also in danger. I was reading yesterday once again a paper about fraud, about all kinds and all level of frauds in biology in France, but France is not the only case. All the problem of withdrawal of papers which have been a bit manipulated, let's say. The pressure to publish and the privilege given to exploitation as compared to exploration is probably not a good news for the productivity of research of disrupting research, let's say. The loss of trust in scientific results coming from the non-reproducibility of many papers in biology, but also in other, it's particularly visible in biology, and the development of withdrawal of publications and so on and so forth, do not improve the reputation of science in society. And as we know, reading every day an average of 3 fake news coming from the President of the United States, it's important to have places where truth is being preserved. So I have gone through all these consequences of radical reforms which have been performed over the last about 40 years, 35 years. If you want to know more, you can go through some of these references which come out of the big research I was talking of in introduction. Thank you.
Agradece ao público e agradecemos também à professora Paradeise e encerramos a sessão. Alguém quer colocar alguma questão? Alguém quer colocar uma questão?
Merci pour l'excellente conférence, c'était un plaisir de vous écouter. Je n'ai pas une question en fait, parce que j'ai plusieurs inquiétations à partir de votre présentation. En fait, je ne peux pas m'empêcher de penser à une espèce d'accommodation du système, parce que je pense dans la question d'un marché de l'éducation supérieure au monde. Et comment ce marché international explose le système national. Pour nous, ça c'est un peu presque évident en ce moment au Brésil, parce qu'on a la typologie des universités ici que vous avez présentée. On a les vénérables, les wannabes et les missionnaires. On a les 3, mais on n'a pas les tops, parce que les tops, en général, on est assujetti, on est dépendant un peu des États-Unis, Angleterre, France, etc. Donc, en ce moment, je peux penser peut-être à une espèce d'accommodation du marché de l'enseignement supérieur au monde, où les règles sont déjà données pour les dominants de ces marchés. C'est je voudrais vous écouter par rapport à ça. Et l'autre, c'est, je ne peux pas m'empêcher aussi de faire les rapports entre les marchés de l'éducation supérieure et les marchés des entreprises. Et bien sûr, les marchés internationaux de ces entreprises. Merci. Precisa traduzir? Eu perguntei em relação ao mercado.
Could you answer? Good question, of course. Accommodation to the system, accommodation to the market. Well, some refuse the accommodation. Will they survive? Question mark. Some accept fully, and they may also have problems in the middle range, because they might lose what makes their existence as institutions with reputation and with metrics-based excellence. What makes the strengths of the top of the piles is that they know how to remain on both sides of reputation and excellence. But in their internal working, in the social processes, and also in the formal rules of these institutions, the issue of excellence is a non-issue. Of course, they always look at where they stay, because it has also a strong impact on their recruitments. But when you interview professors scholars in top universities, they tell you how much they feel that this running after excellence is a nonsense. Okay? When you look for talents, when you look forward for talents, in order to be successful, you have to make good offers, not only in terms of salaries, but also in terms of facilities, in terms of quality of students, and so on and so forth. And to do that, you have to try to sort out who is exceptional. You always want the best. And you can afford to buy the best and to raise the best. A striking feature in such universities is that most of the time, I put Harvard outside of the game, but public or private, they hire scholars at a young age, at the beginning of their career, and they have a challenge, which is to keep them and to bring them up to the end of their career, except of course, if they don't fulfill their promises, and they have 7 or 8 years before tenure to show what they are able to do. Okay? So it's not inevitable to comply, to accommodate to the system, to the market. But it's tough not to, and it's dangerous. But it's also dangerous to accommodate. Well, what TOPs do is that they concentrate resources. And there has been policy after World War II in the US to push forward concentration of resources. For which reason? Because research and thus the wealth of the country, the nation, depends upon big money and bigger money over time. That's one of the very reasons, not the only one, for stratification of universities. The British have done the same, and we are now in Europe doing the same. But the Chinese, the one who invented the Shanghai ranking, AU, did the same. The first excellence initiatives were born in China, in Korea, and in Japan, quite long before Europe. And if the Shanghai ranking was built, it was for the Chinese government to find out which were its most promising universities. Not to say that the French universities or the Brazilian universities were good or bad. It didn't matter. They just wanted to get benchmarks over the world to organize. And they have been quite successful in this matter. But this concentration of money, of course, of resources in general, has a tremendous impact, and often a negative impact on missionaries, because they disqualify missionaries. They only defined professors which have been recruited according to the same rules as the others, and which are the major proportion of the academic staff. They discourage them, and I met a guy in a conference a few months ago from South Africa, and he told me, well, what you're telling, we experienced that in South Africa. We have universities in which Stellenbosch, Witwatersrand, the major universities in the country, where the government puts almost all the money dedicated to higher education. What about the rest? In this country where we need so much higher education to comply with civil peace, let's say. So we experience this all over. Next, second question, the labor market of higher education, the labor market of enterprises at large. Many answers to this question. First of all, it depends very much, of course, upon the field. We have been studying in depth history departments on the one side, no hope. If you watch the slope of the recruitments in history at the world level, but also in top universities such as Berkeley, such as Harvard, you see that the number of recruitments are pulling down. Because the immediate labor market for historians is, of course, in the academia. But also, in a way, it doesn't matter so much what you have studied outside technical fields, because what you learn or what you are supposed to learn in a university is a way to think, a way to develop an interpretation of the world, and wherever you have developed that, it's useful for positions in firms, except that all firms do not recognize that. So you cannot make a direct link between education and employment, because employment is dynamic, first of all. The labor market changes over time and very rapidly at the moment. And one of the challenges for universities is to find out the ways to go as far and as quickly with renewal of competences as it is necessary on the labor market, especially in the technical fields and high technological fields. Next, the relationship between the market of higher education and the market of and the labor market at large depends very much upon how higher education is perceived in a given country. For instance, in France, having been a student in a grande école is a major resource to enter at the best positions in the labor market, which is not always a very good thing for society and for economics, because it's not because you have attended École Nationale d'Administration that when you are 23 you are able to understand what's going on the field, develop bargaining. We have very high positioned leaders in France at the moment who are a very good illustration of what I'm talking about. In France, the doctorate is not recognized as the best degree by the firms in general. In collective agreements, they are not valued. Doctorate is not valued. Okay? So, of course, that has a very big importance about the way universities at large, whichever they are, whichever type they are, can provide labor force for the labor market. I was willing to say something else, I forgot. Sorry.
Agradecemos muito a professora Caterine Paradeise e a presença de vocês. Muito obrigado e vamos encerrar então.